Recording for broadcast to those that want to dial in from home. And I think we've got somebody dialing in from Australia. First time for me, but Councillor Ian Parry is joining us later. Hasn't yet dialed in, but I think it's about 10 o'clock in Australia where he is now. We've also got, ready for that particular agenda item, two representatives from the LEP who will be with us for later in the agenda, and that's Alan Rogers and Andy Devaney, who are sat at the other end. We'll go first of all into apologies. Pastor Mandy.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillors Heath and Councillor Peters.
Are there any other apologies we need to record? No, I'll take that as a no. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations to make? Again, I'll take that as a no.
Chairman, just before we carry on,
just use the microphone for the broadcast.
Chairman, I just thought I'd mention it. It's probably not relevant, but I'm a member of the BIC for the County Council, which is a Business Innovation Centre, which has dealings with, as you know, with the LEP and other organisations.
Okay, thanks for making that known. Any other declarations of interest? No? We'll move to the minutes, and the minutes of the last meeting were those of the 12th of December, all of last year. Are there any alterations I need to be aware of in terms of those minutes? I shall sign those as a true record. Which then brings us to the item 4, which is the ONS work programme. I'll preempt that, but we obviously have various members of the various coordinating ONS committees. We've got 4 coordinating ONS committees. I'll invite the other members to make any comments they wish to. But in the absence of Deb Breen, who's away at the moment, just to review the content, and what we're attempting to do is look at the suitability of that content and also the timeliness of what we've got into our work programme. We also have a joint overview and scrutiny group which looks at any work that's cross-cutting. So in terms of the 4 committees, there's myself for corporate review, and I shall shortly just mention a few things that are happening in corporate review. We've got Councillor Bob Spencer, who looks after safeguarding, Councillor Tina Clements, Prosperous, and Councillor Jeremy Pert for health. You'll see in the report there are 14 separate ONS meetings that have taken place during the year. And if you look at page 9 in the report and page 11 in the PDF, you'll see there's some additional studies and also some visits that have taken place by some of those subcommittees. In terms of work groups, there's also, as well as the 4 ONS committees, we've got the MTFS group, and you'll see we've got that on the agenda for a report back. We've got the Integrated Core Hubs group. We've got the Climate Change group, chaired by Councillor Sam Thompson, and there's the Women's Health group. So if I can go into, first of all, the corporate review, which starts on page 10 of the report, or page 12 of the PDF. Naturally enough, I'll mention the fact that we've got the LEP for review today. We've also got our quality performance on the agenda, quarterly performance, which is on for the February meeting, the next meeting. And that will assess our financial situation post the settlement that happened in December. We've got a second visit to the boundaries work. We've had the first one where we agreed with the 62 members. So this will getting into more detail. And I know various people involved in their local meetings to discuss the second stage of agreeing boundaries. But we'll review that at the next meeting. And then further ahead, some of the things that we've got on the future agendas, things like civil contingencies, governance of outside bodies, children's services transformation, and particularly the budget implications are of interest to this group. And then in March, we've been asked to give an early look at the people strategy before that goes to Cabinet. Okay, any questions for me on the corporate review? Councillor Francis.
Yeah, the one that I'm interested in more than anything is revised Children's Transformation Programme budget implications. I've asked on numerous occasions about this. That we gave £8.1 million about 4 or 5 years ago now. We know that there was a lot of problems with the unions that actually gave us serious implications on the transition through children's services to a new working model. But the case is that have we spent that money wisely? Has it all been spent? Has it done the job it's supposed to do? And has it improved the children's services to a point where they're actually working better than they did before? And on the last 2 points, in my view, it hasn't happened.
Okay. Well, that'll obviously be for the particular meeting that we have in the future. Rather than for discussion today, it's on the agenda for future meeting.
Can I just add to that, the scrutiny committees have got a lot of work to do on this, particularly on the children's transformation, to make sure, and I know that we're interested in the budget implications, but there's certain parts of the children's transformation that, in my view, have gone the wrong way. So, you know, we seriously need to have a look at it.
Okay. Councillor Spencer's indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just a little confused. Have we moved off item 4, overview and scrutiny committees?
No, we're on item 4. This is just preempting what's going to be discussed. That's the point I've made. We're not actually here for discussing it today, but Councillor Francis has raised something that he would like to have us aware of.
Can I then just raise a couple of issues around the item 4, overview and scrutiny? One of the, well, first of all, I think, and I hope I speak for all of the other chairmen of the other committees, I find it quite a useful process, and I think it has real value to the organisation. There are some frustrations for me with some of this, not least of all, something that happened only yesterday. And again, it might be only my committee that suffers from this, and it might be the nature of the subject matter. But we get pulled reports. We get reports from the work programme. And for example, I have my next committee in a couple of weeks' time. And I found out yesterday that one of the major reports on that has been pulled because there hasn't been enough time to consider its journey through various other bits and pieces. Now, I understand that, but the difficulty is that there are limited opportunities for us to discuss some of these very important issues. Speaking to members over the last couple of weeks around how they feel about attendance at meetings, there is some frustration about coming to only to find that the agenda is very short. Some members will have taken time off from work to attend. And there's a real knock-on for me here, because my next meeting that was going to have 2 or 3 meetings, reports, now only has 1. It's something of a lost opportunity, I think, and there is a natural assumption that that report will then go to the next one. The next one for me is in April. That's already a very heavy agenda, so therefore we're going to struggle to include that because of the amount of time that we have. And also part of the committee that I chair, there's a great deal of encouragement to be proactive around looking at various things and being flexible enough. And I give as an example of that, Ofsted recently put out a report about the heightened safeguarding concerns for young people missing from education. We were trying to shoehorn that into the April meeting. Now we can't, because this other report that's been pulled at very short notice is going to that meeting. And I suppose I was just looking for some reassurance that we should be sticking to the work plan dates they should really be cast in stone. I don't think, and again, it may only be my own committee, but we do seem to pull reports at a whim, and that has a real knock-on effect as we move forward. Just two other very quick points, if I could, around it. Sometimes some of the content of the reports, and again, I may only be speaking for my own committee, they don't always address the issues that perhaps members want to scrutinise, and given the important role that we have around scrutiny. And I just wondered whether we are now mature enough to be able to recognise and have some formal means of feedback around recognising for future meetings precisely what members want and are looking for, so they don't become wasted time. And the last point, if I could, and it might be an extension of the safeguarding or the overview and scrutiny committee role, but we've had a couple of examples of issues where, and I use as one as the sexual exploitation in schools report. That was probably 2 years ago. Members in this hall here went along to a study day. We invited representatives from all of the schools. We asked for a report to be done by an outside group, which it was. And we now have started that momentum and that wheel in motion around what we intend to do about this very serious issue. We still haven't had a conclusion to that report, almost 2 years on. And I do think that there's some reputational issues here for us as a council, that if we are brave enough to lift the stone and look under to see what we find, we should also have some commitment and responsibility to making sure that we accept whatever recommendations, or at least we have an opportunity to discuss them. So I don't want to sound completely negative. I think the process is working really well, but there are some real frustrations, certainly for me as the chair of one of these groups, around how this scrutiny process moves forward. Thank you.
I'll agree with everything Bob said.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spencer. What I would say is we've got the Chair's coordinating group coming up in a week's time. That would be, I think, an ideal opportunity to raise things when people like Chris Eberly will be present in terms of discussing why information is not ready for a report or why agenda items get pulled. Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. I would like to associate with the comments of Councillor Spencer in regards to the value of scrutiny, because I think this council is robust in the scrutiny that it provides. I, however, cannot say that in health we've ever, and I'm sure Councillor Atkins can attribute to this, ever had a short meeting. Maybe that's due to the poorness of the quality of the chairmanship, however. I did want to just comment on a couple of things, because I think any member of the public reading this report, looking at the forward view, might think that we're missing some of the key things within health. And I just wanted to put on record that the Health Committee has relentlessly focused over the last 18 months on 3 or stroke 4 issues, and that being GP access, second of all, the system pressures. And no one could have gone through the whole of Christmas without the shameful pictures of ambulances queuing up outside of Staffordshire's hospitals. And that is something that has been on this agenda for health for certainly the last 18 months. It is not an ambulance service issue, as I'm sure most people are aware, but instead a system-wide issue and the pressures within the overall system. But I would not want any member of the Staffordshire public to think that we hadn't been looking at this and trying to work with the health service to improve the pressure that is undoubtedly on the whole system. The other area that we've been focusing in on is social care reforms. But implicit in all of that is the need to look at people, because it is not, you don't have to be too much of a market follower to see that unemployment is low, the level of vacancies is high, and there is a real importance now to recruit, retain and develop people within not just health and social care, but within most industries. And as a result, I pay tribute to the partnership working that goes on within health, working with our partners to ensure that they bring the right quality of representation, but also brains that think and then bring in action to that. And I would also just pay tribute to the members of the committee for the hard work that they put in. But maybe what this report is missing, if you don't mind me saying so, Chair, is also that sort of review of what's gone on in the past, because I do think that's a really important context piece to understanding the context of the work that goes on within Staffordshire, within Scrutiny. And the final comments I would make are twofold, unrelated to that one. One is I don't understand what a doll is, so maybe the use of acronyms would be less helpful, because I even Googled it and couldn't find it out. Might be a duty of life or something, I don't know, but it would be useful just not to have an acronym. And I can't resist the opportunity, but Avanti is mentioned in here alongside HS2, and I am shocked at the poor performance of Avanti and the overall impact on Staffordshire. And maybe that's something that we might want to take forward, because frankly it's affecting the economy, it's affecting many businesses, and you know, their performance seems to go without sufficient robust check. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's probably another one for the coordinating group that we've got coming up. Any other comments? Councillor Clements, anything you want to say about your committee?
Thanks, Chair. Everything I was going to say, Bob said first, and then Councillor Pert has agreed. So without wanting to repeat everything, I'll be quiet.
Okay, if there are no other comments, we'll conclude that item. Move on to the next item. And that is the MTFS group. I've noticed that Councillor Parry has joined us on the call, so he's online as we speak. As far as the MTFS is concerned, this is the report of the working group for considering the latest MTFS 2022 to 2027. And I will go through what we've got as the latest draft. I'll say it's the latest draft. The idea is that we consider that latest draft today. It's then due for consideration by Cabinet on the 25th of January. And if there are any need for any amendments to what the group has produced, I'm asking for you to authorise me to agree those with the officers so that we can submit that in time for the 25th. You'll see that previously we've focused on areas that we thought were high spend areas that we wanted to concentrate on. In this particular year's assessment, we've looked at the focus on three areas, and that is the whole aspect of how we look at capital, both the programme and the assets that we've got for our capital financing. We've looked at our levels of reserves and whether that's appropriate for the actions and business that we're seeking to conduct as a council. And thirdly, we've looked at SEND, S-E-N-D, particularly the transport cost element. And we've spent a lot of time speaking to both the Cabinet member and officers on special needs travel. You'll read in the report that we started off with a requirement to effectively look for savings of 54.5 million at the start of the year. But during the year, inflation, cost of living rises, the impact on residents, businesses and services meant that the Cabinet agreed an additional 5 million to cover that inflation and additional pressures. So that was at the start of the year and during the year. Then the report goes through the three areas that I've mentioned. We've discussed the methodology, how we understand the issues, how we've tested those people we've invited for interview. We've had responsible officers, we've had elected members in front of us. We've tested their understanding of how they see the pressures. And we've also suggested, in some cases, pace change, that we'd like to see things move faster, or we've suggested strategy change. And those recommendations are discussed in quite some detail on page 38 of the report, or up to page 40 of the PDF. So there's quite a lot of detail there, and it goes into recommendations towards the end. What won't have escaped your notice is that we, since the start of the year, have had the government settlement, and that is discussed at page 40 of the PDF, and that was announced on the 19th of December. So on the 19th of December, we knew there was a one-year only settlement, but also some figures allocated for and published for 24-25. So we didn't get a two-year settlement as was trailed, but we got a one-year settlement and knowledge about the level of spending that was likely in 24-25. We've seen things like the revenue support grant has been uplifted for inflation. We've seen that new homes bonuses will continue for 23-24. And we've seen the additional social care fund for both adult and children allocated in that budget. And we've also seen a grant for assisting with hospital discharge, something that's been mentioned already this morning. So the overall effect of all of those budget announcements was that there was 37 more in the way of settlement than was expected. So I give that in context against the 54.5 million at the start of the year. And obviously there are conditions applied to those grants. They're not completely free and easy. They are levied against particular targets that we, as an authority, have to achieve. The other headlines in the settlement that was agreed on the 19th of December is a 3% council tax threshold and a 2% adult social care increase. And they are for both 23-24 and 24-25. So the complexion has changed somewhat from the start of the year to the end of the year. I think you'd agree 37 million additional unexpected or less than expected contributions has helped the situation. However, our work on the MTFS group is not complete. You'll also see that in 25-26 there are planned reductions in public spending. So the sort of things that we're looking at as a MTFS group and through corporate review to look for efficiencies, look for budget savings, look for other income, still need to continue. So there's still a need for the MTFS group to do the work that it has been doing. On page 41, or page 39 of the report, page 41 of the PDF, you'll see the conclusions of the MTFS group. Main conclusion is we conclude that through robust processes in place, we see that there's likely to be less high need for use of reserves. And in paragraph 68, we've discussed, that's on page 42 of the PDF, paragraph 68 refers to the gaps and the challenges that we still foresee affecting the Cabinet and the authority. We've also concluded in our general conclusions that we think the reserves are possibly at the higher end of what we think is risk appropriate. And we also made a separate observation, which is something that carried on from the previous year. It wasn't part of the three headings that we looked at, but if you remember those that went to the Day in the Life training that we attended, I think most people in the room attended that, and it echoed on what I know Councillor Pert and I felt we'd raised in the previous year, that certainly in terms of children in care cases, we don't believe that we in Staffordshire possibly close those cases as readily or as efficiently as some of the other authorities that we examined in our MTFS study of a previous year. So I think that's my précis of where the report is, but the point now is to look at members who are not on the MTFS group, if you'd like to make any observations, or indeed for those that have been part of the MTFS group, to make any comments about how they think the process has gone during the year. And I'll open it up for discussion. Councillor Francis.
Can I go on to page 42, Area 3, Sand Transport? Our school, Marshlands Community Special School, we've recently taken on another school further down the road because we've expanded. We've got about 128 pupils on roll, with about another 18 waiting to come on. Now, the head's been pulling her hair out for the last few weeks since the new Send transport systems come in. I've got a meeting with the head straight after this meeting to talk about it, well, where I'll get a lot more information and know where we're going with it. But one of the things in here, which is paragraph 15, welcome the work being done to provide more mainstream education provision for SEND pupils. I'm fed up of going on about this in this council because I've had no definite responses to it, and I haven't seen any definite provision for it or actual systems that are going to improve the Senkos in schools. Now, without a good Senko in a mainstream school, these pupils will fail, and they're failing now. They're failing now. They've been failing for the last 13, 14 years I've been on this council, and before, because I've been involved with this for 30 plus years. I want to see a report that tells me exactly who the Senkos are in the mainstream schools, how many we've got, if they've got the qualifications to do the job. They're not just a teacher pulled out of class and told to do the job when they haven't got time to do it, and if they're actually doing the job that they're supposed to do with provision for a special educational needs pupil within that school as getting the right assessments and the right support. And I haven't seen any of that yet. Thanks, Chairman.
Okay, I think that echoes the comments I made earlier about some of the things we observed to do with pace. I think I agree with you that there's a sentiment there that we'd like to see more mainstream inclusion of SEND children. And I think I agree with you that I've heard that being quoted as being an expectation or a desire of the future. One of the things we said in the MTFS group is that it all seems to be set up for next year, for the next financial year. And we were making the observations about some of the things that are desirable, possibly being sooner.
As you know, Chairman, I was on the MTFS group for 12 years and I kept banging on about this, the same as I kept banging on about Entrust. Where's the dividend from Entrust? Where's the money from Entrust? Is it still working properly? And are we getting value for money? There's all these things that are going on in the background, and as members, I think we've been kept not in the dark, but certainly in a foggy place.
Well, we can certainly touch up the sense of urgency, if you like, on the SEND transport. I think we've made the comment that we would like to see it happen sooner. The other thing that I observed is that there is a desire to look at some of the programs, the systems that they have for working out routes, and it was very clear to me that it's done on a very occasional basis, and I'm surprised to see that that's the way it is. I would have thought that they would do it at least every September. So that sense of urgency, I think, is the thing that the MTFS group were very keen to point out. Councillor Worthington.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to endorse John's feeling about this. I mean, I've got the same view as at one time I was also chair of safeguarding before John, and this has been going an awful long time now, and I've got sort of some of the issues, and I think we had, is it Mr. Hallett, Dr. Hallett, who came to audience standards. The number of people now who've got special education needs, a massive increase, and I think, like John says, I'm not sure whether these schools can cope. I mean, I've actually got an instance where I've got a young boy in a school and his EHCP is 5 years out of date. So there's definitely misgivings on that issue, so I concur fully with John's point of view.
Okay, Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to try and leave the debate for much of the members who aren't on the MTFS, but can I just start off by paying tribute to the quality of debate through the MTFS working group, the inquiry that has been undertaken and the scrutiny of the responses under clearly a good quality chairman like yourself. I certainly feel that it's been thorough this year. I want to reflect my comments, however, on page 41 of the pack, 41 electronically 39 of the physical pack. And we only learnt at the end of December of the government settlement. And prior to the government settlement, we were needing to find £20 million out of reserves on top of the savings that had been proposed within the MTFS plan. So as a result, all our focus was how robust is that and how deliverable is it? What actually happened in reality was we got an extra £37 million than planned. So that means that effectively we don't need to borrow, presumably, the 20 million out of reserves to repay back later on. And I would argue, actually, it's a far better position because within the original plan, we'd put in £4 million, £4.2 million of spend on market sustainability and fair cost of care within social care, which presumably now doesn't need to be spent because of what the government's now done in terms of delaying the implementation of social care. So I would argue that 4.2 plus the deficit of 4.2 off the 37, i.e. another 8.4, is in addition to what we were expecting to get. And as a result, that's part of the discussion we haven't really focused in on as the MTFS because we weren't expecting it. And I sat reading the papers and I thought, you know what, one of the things that was great last year was the ambition of the Cabinet in investing £15 million in highways improvements, capital improvements, because those are the things that will consistently cost money, never get done because we've never got it. And I thought it was a very brave move from the Cabinet last year. What I thought I understood from the Cabinet, however, was they were going to spend it just on capital schemes, and instead what they did was they made the mistake of cutting the £15 million up into lots of very small schemes and salami sliced it, which meant it didn't really go as far as it should have done, in my personal view. Now, I think we should, within this report, be making the point that there is an extra 37, I would argue 37 plus 8, million pounds more than expected. And why are we not looking at another capital scheme like last year was proposed? Because it's saving us money in the long term. If we've got some extra money today, there'll be some people say, well, let's put it into a rainy day fund. I would argue, let's save some costs now, particularly as costs are only going to go up. And we should be looking to do the brave thing and do the best thing for our residents.
You certainly had agreement with Councillor Francis. Anybody else like to comment on that? There's some nodding going on, so I think we can include that as a recommendation. I certainly would concur with that. I've often said that 95% of, at least 95% of my postbag is about highways. So any opportunity to bring forward activity on that would be welcomed. Any other comments from any member of the committee or otherwise? Councillor Spencer.
Chair, thank you. Just quickly, I think going back to the point I made earlier about my own committee and how, quite rightly, this council looks for alternatives. This report talks about benchmarking, and I think it identified, I think it was Nottingham and Norfolk, as doing something significantly different that we could learn from. I just feel that the points that were made earlier about prioritising some of this, because the difficulty in moving forward when you benchmark and start finding others is that it naturally takes time for you to explore whether whatever they do is suitable to you. And I would just add my comments about I think it's right to look, but we need to move forward and we need to recognise if there is any advantage there rather than that become yet another hurdle to hold the council back.
Councillor Mrs Atkins.
I think obviously the problem here, as Councillor Pert was suggesting, is the sort of short-termism involved. I mean, for instance, the social care area had to come up with a plan in 2 weeks prior to December the 16th to reduce delayed discharges. So they had just 2 weeks to come up with a plan. And all the plan had to include was new initiatives. You know, that's a crazy way of having to run services. And of course, all this money had to be spent by the end of March this year. And, you know, councils can't operate on the basis of waiting for a handout that might or might not come. And you know, we try to, given that 2/3 of our budget is spent on social care, You would think, wouldn't you, that you would be looking at some sort of long-term plan, not something which effectively has to be, 2.9 million, that has to be spent by the end of March and has to be cobbled together in 2 weeks just before Christmas. It doesn't make any sense at all, and it really means as a result that money is effectively wasted because, rather than invest in long-term stability within the social care market, and after all, it's social care which is creating the problems of ambulances queuing outside hospitals. 31, I think, was one count just before Christmas. 31 ambulances at £170 an hour. It doesn't make any sense to waste that money when, in fact, with proper long-term planning, or at least not so short-term that we're talking a couple of weeks, that money would not be wasted. And that is the problem I think we have here, is we can't plan in the future because we don't know what government's going to do. We don't know whether we're going to have a 1 year or 2 year or 3 year settlement. And what's more, we don't know what the government might throw at us in a panic to try and reduce the pressures on the NHS.
Okay, bringing some of those comments together, I think Councillor Pert's made a point that if you've got the opportunity while we are in a situation of being perhaps better funded than was expected, it's a good chance to look at things like highways that might be an opportunity to save. And I think Councillor Spencer's right to say that we don't want to particularly rush things in terms of Nottingham and Norfolk and their stance. And Councillor Atkins is right also that we don't want to be knee-jerk planning things. But I think what we have got is the bonus, if you like, of a less challenging budget going into next year, perhaps not having spent the level of reserves that might have been expected, is some of the cultural changes that are required can be started to be planned now. And just to echo what Norfolk and Nottinghamshire were doing, is that they're going into more of an education for parents in terms of not necessarily relying on send as an automatic, to actually consider whether there's an opportunity to train parents or educate, whichever word you want to use, to understand that there are other options than just relying on the local authority providing the transport. Councillor Francis.
Yeah, just taking up Charlotte's point, I think we've all been arguing about this for a long time along the same lines. And it really upsets me that the demographics that are hitting us now in the beginning of the 21st century have been known about for 50 years under various governments of various colours, and none of them have grasped the nettle to do anything about it. And it was done in the autumn that we were going to put a social care package together as a budget from the government, and they squashed it. Social care should be under the NHS. They've got enough money to do it, and it isn't being done properly. And as I've just alluded to, the demographics of this have been coming down the track for a long, long time, and a lot of us in here are the demographic problem and getting older and more sick. So it's a serious, serious issue, and it's just going to get worse unless it's tackled.
Okay, any other fresh comments? I think we've made some amendments which, if you're happy, I will discuss with Mandy and adjust the report that's submitted to the Cabinet. Any other comments? Councillor Pert, you're looking surprised?
I'm hoping that Councillor Francis isn't suggesting killing us above a certain age off. I'm just a bit concerned by... But thank you.
Okay, is that the agreement of the meeting then, that I will put forward the adjustments or suggestions that we've made in addition to what we've got circulated? So I'll make those necessary adjustments. Okay. That brings us to item 6 then, which is the scrutiny review of the Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire Local Enterprise Partnership 21-22. And it's down as the report of the chair of that. Can I pass to you, Alan? Alan Evans, if you'd like to lead off. Sorry, Alan Rogers.
And thank you for inviting us this morning. So I'm going to quickly hand over to Andy, who will take us through the presentation, then we'll take any questions that we'd be happy to answer.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everyone. Good morning. So my name's Andy Devaney. I am the Interim Chief Executive Officer of the LEP. So I've been... Apologies, is that better? So I'm the Interim CEO of the LEP, and I've been in post for a few weeks now. So hopefully I can talk you through this. If there's any gaps, I'm sure Alan will be able to back me up. And says we can answer some questions afterwards. So obviously there's the two of us. So why we're here, obviously we've been asked today to just explain some of the work that's gone on over the last year and to consider the recommendations. This presentation was circulated, so I won't go through in every detail. Obviously we're required to be scrutinised by yourselves at least annually, and we also adhere to a national assurance framework, which we've recently submitted to our annual return to BAYS last week, so we're completely up to date on that. What does the LEP do? Well, we're designed to bring together business and local authorities to drive economic growth, create jobs and raise skills. Essentially, we're trying to really get that private sector voice into that economic development area, with the ultimate ambition being for reformed to a set position of the voice of business. And that's, you'll hear me say that quite a lot, that real voice of business is what we exist to be. The board currently comprises 15 directors, of which Alan is obviously chair. It's predominantly private sector board, which includes the Chambers of Commerce and universities, the leaders of Stoke Council and Staffordshire County Council, and also representatives of the borough councils. We're currently undergoing a review of the board, so that although that structure will change, it will still have those representatives of the local authority, and it will still be predominantly private sector as we move into 23-24. The LEP review was something that was carried out nationally, so there's 38 LEPs. That's now being reduced. Areas that have command authorities are sometimes losing their LEPs. What that has done is really encourage LEPs to be more focused, more strategic, and to be a much more representative of local business, and that's what we intend to be. That review was completed in February. As I say, the work that we're doing now locally is really as a result of that, and you will see those changes implemented over the coming weeks and months. Our existing structure is broken down as demonstrated. So we have an executive board, which really is that really strategic body that makes those decisions. And that's served by a strategic management group, which looks at delivery of programmes, such as getting building fund and other capital programmes. An audit and finance committee, which has delegated powers, really looks at spend, manages risk on behalf of the organisation. And other groups, when necessary, that look at things like skills, employment, local industrial strategy, to make sure that all the bases are covered. Obviously, again, as discussed, we are compliant with the National Assurance Framework, which is undertaken by central government. So, obviously, as I said, the LEP review was completed in February, and what that meant was there was some uncertainty, some uncertainty does continue nationally, as obviously we're all aware of government spending restrictions and what's happening over the next 12 months. But what we do have is a mandate, and we're working with government to ensure that mandate is delivered strongly in Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire. We have an ongoing range of engagements with partners, and that includes local authorities, universities, private sector, etc. We recently commissioned a SITREP, which, as it says, gathered intelligence direct from businesses, which is important, and really giving us a better understanding of that local economic position. That's something that we continue to do regularly and we'll continue to refresh over the coming weeks and months. So we've got a real understanding of how our economy works, where the gaps are and where we can improve. Obviously, there's ongoing programme management in terms of those capital programmes. Some of those programmes are listed here. Obviously, the local growth deal and getting building fund are two of the most significant programmes. They are managed by the LEP board and then that subgroup of this SPMG, as discussed earlier. There is attachments that you've all been provided with to give some minutes of those, to give you some context of what they do. And obviously you've got things like the City deal and European funding. European funding programmes will come to an end nationally this summer. Local authorities are stepping up with things like UK Shared Prosperity Fund and other programmes to replace that. The Growth Hub, which is the last one, is something that has been a success locally and will be continuing to build on in the next 12 months as well. So what we achieved in that time period, so as you can see, significant commercial space created, almost 50,000 square metres, significant jobs created as a result of our investments, almost 300. A huge amount of businesses supported, not just through COVID in terms of survival and resilience, but with a real dedication to growth as well. Contribution to new house building, and again, as we were talking about skills, over 3,000 square metres of new learning and training spaces being created. So a significant year. What we're saying today is we ask that you consider the information we've contained and for delivery of its objectives for this year and moving forwards. And we also consider some of the lessons learned in the delivery of economic growth in this area. I must say the last 2 years have been particularly strange in economic development, as we can all understand, and there is significant changes coming, so we want you to all be aware of those. That's our very brief kind of run through of the year, and we're happy to take any questions on the report or on the presentation. Thanks.
Okay, I'll open it up for questions. I gather you got our report that we've got in front of us. You've seen the, so if we refer to a paragraph number, you've got the means of getting into it. Yes, first question.
Hello, thank you. It's Councillor Sheila McKiernan from East Staffs Borough Council. So I come at the invitation of the Staffordshire County Council because I'm the member for Scrutiny. It was just a comment I wanted to make, really, which I made this time last year as well, and I have made previously. It's very disappointing to see the turnout today for such an important committee, overview and scrutiny at county level. We at district and borough level rely on you to do effective scrutiny. And I've said before that I don't think that having the LEP scrutiny within this scrutiny panel is a good way of doing proper scrutiny. The comparator I have is because I sit on the GBS LEP scrutiny committee, which has members from each of the 8 districts as well as the metropolitan boroughs. We meet 4 times a year. We have visits, we have reports. At our meetings, we will have 3 or 4 agenda items, and we will have people to present them at the highest level, and we are able to question them. We're simply not able to do that in this forum. I did offer to the chair last year, I sent him a paper that we did our annual report, and I offered to come and talk to him and work with him to improve the scrutiny of the LEP, but that hasn't happened. Having said that, the report looks very comprehensive. It looks very shiny. Obviously, a lot's been done, but it's at such a high level and so full of acronyms and seems so Stoke, Kiel, Newcastle oriented that I, as a member from East Staffs, don't feel able to effectively scrutinise the work of the LEP. And I think that's a real shame.
Just in terms of attendance, we've got Councillor Mike Wilcox is here representing Litchfield District Council. We did expect somebody from South Staffs. We've got some apologies for a couple of members of the committee, is that right?
We have, yes.
Right. Okay.
We don't have any members of the public for such an important committee. I believe it is open to the public to attend, at least on the web.
Yes, that is the case, yeah. Okay. Any other questions at this stage? Can I start with a question I wanted to ask? I looked at the strategic aims of the LEP, and there's a reference to what's due to be achieved between a particular period of 2014 to 2024. You've said to grow the economy by 50% and generate 50,000 new jobs. In our reports at points 3.3 and also at 3.5, there are a couple of statistics there. It's 52,000 jobs from 2001 to 2020. So I just wonder why that period's been picked, because it's not coinciding with the aims. And similarly, 27% GVA compared to a target, again, which was based on 2014 to 2024. But you've got a stat there which is involving the same period, 2001 to 2020. Just wonder why there's a disparity in the years.
I think for some of these stats, it often takes 2 years for those figures to catch up in terms of GVA. So we wouldn't be able to do a GVA of to 2022, probably until 2024. So that will be that will be the discrepancy on the date. Obviously, the goals for that period up until 2024 will obviously have the date as once you get into 25, 26. So obviously the date is obviously usually at least a year behind in order to play catch up for the GVA data.
On the subject of measuring things like GVA, how robust do you think your measurements are? And what's the process for assessing that?
I think they're as robust as they can be in terms of the sit rep that was commissioned over the last 2 years gave us an indication of where we are. What I would say is the last 2 years, this isn't just locally but nationally as well, that measuring GVA over the last 2 years has been difficult because of the slowdown in the economy, because of the lockdowns. But the methods we use are the same as nationally. It's done by Bayes. So we're confident that the figures are correct, but they are open to scrutiny. And obviously we're constantly going to be testing that. As we move forward into the kind of new structure, we'll certainly be doing another look at the economy over the next probably the first 2 quarters of 23-24, which this can be updated again, which again we can certainly share that out more widely.
Councillor Francis.
Yeah, can you just explain to me on 5.2, develop a local sit rep, what the heck's that? And what are its aims and objectives? What's its terms of reference? Is it the same terms of reference as a LEP or something totally different? Is it a totally different animal or a new animal or a mix of two? What is it?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take that one. So a SITREP is an abbreviation for situation report. So it's a point in time intelligence around the business landscape. So we put the survey. So we have one of the jobs of the LEP is to understand what's going on in the economy. And as Andy's already explained, that when you're using official data, there's a significant lag. So you're often driving the car in the rear view mirror. And as we've just seen, things like GVA data. So what we look to do is provide more timely data that's much more about what's happening on the ground. So we take data from the chamber, and they'll give us a view through their quarterly surveys. And then what we did to be more robust, because lots of the target market from the chamber is small businesses, is we commissioned our own report, which looks at a wider range of businesses and different verticals and different segments of business to create our own situation report. And we use that then to contrast against the various views so that we get a more rounded view of the business landscape as a whole, and to take into account the previous councillor's comments, we make sure that it's more geographically representative. So the chamber, who we subcontract the growth hub to, is headquartered in Stoke-on-Trent. Obviously, we have services from the chambers in the south as well, and we make sure that the SITREP is representative of the whole of the patch, so the whole of Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, next is Councillor Pert.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the comments about the LEP being more strategic, because I think as an ambition that has to be the case. Because the 3 things on my list would be, and I've already mentioned the shortage of labour and skilled quality labour and improving that. So labour would be, labour and skills would be on my list. Scalability would also be on my list, because I sometimes look at both district and LEP activity, and, you know, it's 5 jobs, and I think, well, so what? You know, so absolutely what? Great job, but how do we make that scalable so we make it 500 or 5,000? How do we change the outcomes for our residents? And then the third one is GVA. So I welcome, you know, your comment in terms of being strategic, but my 3 questions are as follows. We're coming out of the back, hopefully. Maybe we weren't in a recession, but who can tell based on government data? And they know what they say about data in any case. Lies, damn lies, and government statistics. But putting that on one side, it seems to me that the fastest out of the trap, the fastest people investing in our economy now will be the ones who are most successful. The time isn't when we see the beginning of the curve. The time to do it is in advance of the curve. So what do we need to do to make sure that we as Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent are successful in doing that? That's my first question. Second one is, what are your key asks? Because I'm not clear. What are your key asks of some of your partners who are in this room? So, for example, a number of us control the keys to unlock economic development through planning. So I'm not clear through this discussion and through the paper, where are the things that are inhibiting your success? Because frankly, we want you to create jobs, we want you to create better quality jobs and even better quality jobs. So what are the things that we should be taking away with us to do that? And the third one is just a bit more left field, which is, understand the changing roles of LEPs, but actually, what is the role of the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent LEP going forwards, very specifically, and what does that look like, please?
So to take those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Pert, and apologies for the delay. I'm just making sure I've written them down so I can make sure I go through all of those questions. So, and thanks for your feedback and your comments as well. So, in terms of things that we need to do, so I guess in terms of context, obviously the last significant award of capital funds for this LEP was actually in 2020 through the Getting Building Fund. So in terms of leading forward, in terms of your points about what can we do and key asks, the role of the LEP since 2020 has been evolving to be much more around guidance and information and influence rather than actually delivery of capital funds. So to come back to your point about first mover, what we've been trying to do through things like our SITREP is to understand the real situation of the business landscape. So we have a large number of businesses registered in our county. There's 30,000 businesses. 32,000 businesses and 31,000 of them employ less than 5 people. And therefore, if you come back to your point about what do we need to grow, the key point is segmenting those businesses, identifying the ones which are high growth businesses, and then identifying their needs, looking to support them. So one of the issues that you will have is that lots of the schemes and things that come from government are broad brush, and in terms of what we need to do is to make sure that we are able to support everybody, but actually find the information, find the businesses that do have the growth potential, and then going forward in our role is then provide the guidance and provide the insight to the economic development function of the county council and the city council to help you understand how to support those businesses. So in terms of some things that are coming out is that in our area, we purposely use the same data set that is used in Greater Manchester region. And it's interesting that in Greater Manchester, there is significant focus on apprenticeships, significant focus on digital, etc. What we found when we ran the same data in our area is that one of the top 10 needs of our businesses, top 10 priorities of our businesses was around digital transformation. So what you can see there is that in terms of our businesses, they are looking to modernise, they are looking to become more efficient, and back to the point about what do we need to do, it's about identifying those businesses that are forward-thinking, do want to modernise, and my key point there is that the businesses that are very active and not in the 30,000 of smaller businesses is identify the ways we support those businesses that want to modernise. So hopefully that answers that question. In terms of key asks of partners, it is about us being specific in terms of the insight that we can provide to you, which then gives you actionable, actionable things that you can go and do. Good examples will be where we ran the Getting Building Fund and we came up with a number of projects that we actually, those have been being implemented. We found the working relationship with most of the partners really good. If you think about the examples where we've created working spaces, particularly with the energy crisis, where there are now lots of places in our city and town centres where businesses can go and have start on and grow on space. And I think they're good examples where we've been able to work with partners and support that. Again, the key ask is back to the basics really, support us to identify the high growth businesses, and then for most businesses about investment in skills. the key types of things. And then in terms of the role going forward, again, I've probably touched that through most of my answer, is that as the LEP moves away from being and again, just for clarity around some of the other points that were made, is the LEP is pretty well connected to central government and the central government agenda. So as the government changes how it's going to do funding, that directly impacts us. So, while we weren't formally told that our role around capital funding was stopped in April 2020, it then took us another 18 months to find out that was actually the case. But in terms of going forward, we've been trying to be really proactive now to cast off the shackles of the capital side of our role and become much more focused around providing a genuinely representative business board that will support the work of economic development across the local authorities in the patch, and that is going to be our role. So hopefully that answers your question. So happy to take any further questions.
Come back, Councillor Burt.
No, thank you for the thorough response.
Okay. Next is Councillor Tina Clements.
Thank you, Chair. I picked up on the job periods as well, and that they didn't match up. So you've already answered that one. I also have to agree with the councillor to my right about it being very Stoke-on-Trent and Keele. I represent Tamworth, and I don't see how we can scrutinise that from this report. I just wanted to pick up on the carbon emissions targets, which is at 4.4 of our report. And how is that reported, and how are local authorities involved in getting that data for you? And the last one is about enterprise hubs. I don't see any mention of that in the report. Tamworth is currently working on opening up a second one as part of the Future High Street funds. The one we've got is full, and the businesses are now wanting to move out because they're expanding. So, and again, I don't see how that fits into this report as to how well we're doing. Thank you, Chair.
Over to you.
Chair. So thank you. So if I can join question 1 and question 2 around Tamworth and enterprise hubs. So as part of the Getting Building Fund, we went for an open call. We did have and approve a submission for some development around enterprise hubs in Tamworth. Subsequently, that scheme was withdrawn, so we did attempt to make an investment in Tamworth, but that scheme subsequently was withdrawn. So that wasn't a deliberate decision by the LEP to not invest. It was around and again, if you look at the work we do, we provide a whole picture of the whole county. When it comes to capital funding, it's about the schemes which are brought forward by the various partners that are then whether they're executable or investable. Now, in the shortlist of the original 16 projects of the Getting Building Fund, we did have approved projects in Tamworth and Lichfield, but and I'm doing this from memory, so forgive me, a number of those were withdrawn subsequently for various issues, but they weren't a deliberate policy on the part of the LEP to not invest in the south of the county at all. And then in terms of our approach to the whole patch, we do include all of the county in our data sets. We take all of the data across the whole of the patch, and any policy or strategy that comes up with reflects the whole of the patch. So while you will see people like Keele figure pretty well in terms of the proportion of capital, part of that is they are just very, very good at building really strong business cases and getting in and in terms of how they ask for the cash. So that isn't down to a policy decision that we have decided the amount that we'll allocate to various places. It's more to do with the way that the bidding party has pulled something together. But as I said, when we did the Getting Building Fund, we went to extreme lengths to make sure that it was evenly distributed across the county. What subsequently happens is that people will drop out for various reasons. But I'm happy to follow up and give you the detail if that would help around what happened. I'm doing it from memory, and it happened nearly 2 years ago. In terms of carbon targets, the answer is I don't know that. So rather than give Andy a hospital pass, if I can take that offline, I'll come back to you.
Okay, Councillor Mike Wilcox from the Lichfield District Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of questions around the governance in the report. You talk about the fact that it's private private sector-led board of the LEP. I see that at one stage you had a number of vacancies, and I just wondered how you'd address that going forward, and whether or not, what is the geographical spread of those directors? Do you look across the whole of Staffordshire to attract those, and what sort of skill base are you looking for to complement the rest of the directors on the board, please, Chairman?
Thank you. Did you want to say?
I'll take it, John.
Yeah, if you want, okay.
The answer is there was some vacancies. What we're doing now is, because of the LEP review as discussed, moving into 23-24, that board will be reduced in size slightly. So there is some vacancies that will be going out to recruitment for imminently. So there'll be at most, I think, four vacancies that will be attending. Part of that process is we want a gender split, so 50-50 gender split. We want small businesses and large ones, so we don't want it to be dominated by small or large. We want a good blend, and very importantly, we want a very strong geographical base. So it's key to the success of the board that businesses from across the whole county are represented. So to go back to that point, it won't be the case where it's all from one part of the patch, and that will be, again, hold us to account on that through scrutiny. So how the board looks will be generated from across the whole area.
And if I can just add, again, during this period, so as I said, we weren't entirely clear on our role in April 2020. It's evolved over the last 2 years. We've been deliberately careful to make sure that we haven't overpopulated the board with the wrong people, because we knew a change was coming. I think the other point I would add is, in terms of verticals, we're also really sensitive about which types of businesses we have on, because different businesses have different needs. So there are businesses which are revenue intensive, there are businesses which are capital intensive, and again, we're looking to make sure we get that right type of representation. So if you're, so that might be, and the different businesses, that might be something from manufacturing or whatever. So we take all of that into account to make sure we've got a balanced view around the board table.
With that, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Francis.
Yeah, just a point for you, actually, Chairman, and the committee from my point of view anyway, considering we've got £92.53 million of public investment in this, and things are so volatile at the moment, and things can get worse or better, or we don't know what the future holds. Is it a point that we need to scrutinise this more often, probably in the next 6 months in the autumn, so we know where we're going with this? Because things are moving that fast, and they've had a new organisation now, so I think it needs looking at sooner rather than later, to be honest.
Okay, I'll wait for any other comments on that. I did want to ask something which I think is related to that. I looked at the delivery plan for 21-22, and I understand that the LEP is there to be an interface, if you like, between local government and business. And I did get the feeling that most of the things that are contained in the delivery plan are somewhat inward-looking and somewhat introverted. I mean, the things that I saw in that plan were things like thought leadership, CEO intro meetings, and meeting with local authority leaders. I know that is part of the job to know what the local authorities are thinking. But I was wondering what else there is that you might do that's more outward-looking, that affects the businesses. And again, I get the impression that they will not come to you, you need to go to them. And particularly I saw Network of Networks events going throughout. I just wonder if you could explain to the committee, what are the formats of the Network of Network meetings? How do you get your voice heard with the businesses? And what's the format of those in terms of measuring how effective they are and just how much influence you're making with business?
I can take those in reverse, if that's okay. The Network of Networks is something, and this is something we try to build on. So as we become more strategic, to answer that first question, and to become more of that voice of business, that's one of the mechanisms in where we can really add that leadership to the business community. So what that is a collection of business representative organisations, so chambers, Federation of Small Business, Institute of Directors, etc., of which we can play a leading role to make sure that what businesses are telling us is out there and what intel is coming in through those organisations. And it's a way to really understand, on top of things like the SIT-rep and other data, that we're getting context for what that data is telling us around specific business needs, business issues, and we're able to generate that up through government. So any funding that does come down, any programmes that are developed with real business intelligence in mind. So the success of that will be built on how we can deliver programmes, not just through the LEP, but through our partners as well, that is responding to actual business need. So we can look at scaling business, we can look at building better jobs. As Alan said, we can look at those specific verticals as well, but it needs to be based on more than just that data, which, as we discussed, is often slightly out of date before you even get it. So the point of that is to get some real intelligence, real business-driven intelligence. As the board changes and the growth hub starts to change in the coming financial year, we're going to start to see much more of that strategic leadership. So it's really becoming more outward-facing, to answer your question. I completely agree with that kind of observation, and that the delivery plan for next year is much more focused on being more visible, having a profile not just for the LEP but for the whole of Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire, across the Midlands and nationally, to make sure that we're really putting our head up and we're shouting about what we do well, and B, what we need to do better. And it's really being about that proactive engagement of businesses, of organisations, of government, and that's really the delivery plan as we move into the next financial year.
Can you give us a bit more feel of the success of the network meetings? What sort of numbers of businesses are you engaging with? Are they the same ones every time? Do you get cut through to new businesses, new projects?
Yeah, so the network of networks is so there are multiple business representative bodies in the county. So as you said, Farmers Union, all the logistics bodies and all those kind of people. So in the network of networks, that's where we're getting all of those people to talk about the issues. So we are getting probably turnout of about 25 people will turn up to that. So it's about 20 odd business representative bodies that will turn up to that session. So and then they're representing their members. So we're not speaking directly to individual businesses in that session. We're talking to the business representative bodies, and then we're aggregating that data. So as I talked about, one of the issues you have is there's a large number of businesses. A lot of people will have a lot of views. What we're trying to do is to get that contextualized view of what's common across lots of people, because lots of people have a particular niche view which may be historic or whatever. So the network of networks is where we get that rounded view across a wide representation of business representative organisations.
Councillor Francis's question was about scrutinising more often. I suppose the other thing I would highlight is the likely changes that are going to result after the report of March 22. And I'll read there's some integration into the mayoral combined authorities. Would there be an appropriate timescale that we should consider for when that might start in terms of that integration?
So from our perspective, there's a number of pathways defined for LEPs in the country. So of the 38, it's understood that a number of them will transition. So if you're in a region where there is a mayoral combined authority, then I think it's pathway 1 or might be pathway 3. You go straight into the MCA. So all of your capital responsibilities, all your programme responsibilities immediately go straight into the MCA. If you are in an area which doesn't have a devolution deal, then you will continue to operate going forward, but you won't have capital. So that's us. We're in pathway 2. And then if there were a devolution deal between now and 2030, then we would then operate as a pathway 1. We would then become part of that organisation. So what we've tried to do is be proactive in that our capital programmes, because government's moving all capital programmes now to local authorities, we've moved those ready, and we're now reforming ourselves as a business board, so that if there were a devolution deal here, we would be ready to go, and it means we've got more time to mature things. In terms of some of the things that happen to LEPs, as I say, they are driven by central government policy. We have very, very defined guidelines, so we're implementing a template pretty much. But obviously, we would never resist any scrutiny. Happy to, to come to any scrutiny panel, engage with any members, or form a sub-scrutiny board. Meet as frequently as you like. We're very happy to be as open. We are now in the next 2 board meetings agreeing with the board on new structure, on new format. So again, happy if people wanted to get closer to understanding that obviously we wouldn't resist that either.
One more question from me in terms of, I think it's something Councillor Clements touched on earlier, and that's the geographical spread and relevance to the whole of the county and Stoke. Again, I looked at the appendices that we've got. Getting Building Fund affects Stoke-on-Trent and only 4 of the boroughs and districts of the county of Staffordshire. 14 projects. I just wondered how they get selected. And similarly for the LGD, the local growth deal, 33 projects. How do you ensure that you've got geographical spread around the county on those?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So I was chair during the GBF. I wasn't chair during the local growth deal, but I can give great detail on that. So the way we take, so for GBF, what we did was we went to an open call. We asked everybody in the patch to submit projects. We then used an independent appraiser to appraise those business cases. And you will be aware of the Green Book changes that were made in 2020. We then take that list of projects. We try to make it as geographically balanced as possible. We then provide that as a shortlist. So we sent to government 23 projects, which were in the region of around about £35 million worth of ask. Government then took our appraisals, and then they took our shortlist of 23 or whatever it was at the time, and then they came back to us with a shortlist of 16 that they were prepared to fund. So at that point, our influence around geography, as you can see, has been diminished significantly. We then get the list from government of the 16 that they're prepared for us to invest in, and that's what we then went and did. So from our perspective, the geography is treated entirely neutrally. We do reach out to all areas of the patch, and we do engage with all areas of the patch, and that's why, again, back to the point of making sure we engage with every single district and that we're speaking to the officers in every single district, making them aware of the priorities and the policies coming from the LEP so that they are best armed to be able to write business cases that are the most successful, so that everyone has an equal chance of being able to apply for, to apply for funds. And that's how we've been running the LEP in the last 2-3 years since my role. So, whether things are distributed equally or not isn't actually down to a decision by the LEP to decide whether it will or won't invest in a particular geography. It's done purely on the strength of the business case, and the business cases are appraised independently. And then they are obviously further scrutinised by government, and they give us the actual shortlist.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor McKiernan first, and then I'll bring in Councillor Francis.
I'm quite happy for Councillor Francis to go first. Right. The more I sit here today and the more I listen, the more uncomfortable and alarmed I've become with what I'm hearing. It does seem quite vague. I'm concerned about measurement as well. For instance, they mentioned Branston locks again, which is a question I asked last year. There seemed to be an element of attribution, shall we say, where GBS Leicester was claiming they were doing it, and the Stoke and Staffordshire LEP claimed that they were doing it, and I never got a clear answer last time. And also on the networking, a network event where you get 25 people is fine, but the annual meeting that the GBS LEP has over 200 people, and it's a showcase event, and there are many companies and there are many speakers, and it just seems a much larger enterprise. Just going forward from e-staff's point of view, the GBS LEP obviously will merge into the combined authority, of which we are an associate member, not a full member. So hence, I assume, and not being in the cabinet e-staffs, that we will put much more focus into the future of Stoke and Staffordshire LEP, however it evolves. So to come back to my very first point, and to echo Councillor Francis, can you assure us that scrutiny will be improved and you will work with us much more closely than you have done up to now? Because I find it incredible that you're still doing these kind of fact-finding and sit reps after over a decade.
So to come back to the point, in terms of the networking, that was a point where we are, back to my point about getting economic intelligence and the fact that the economy is changing significantly, as you'll know, it will have done over the last 3 years during COVID. Back to your point about an annual event, pre-COVID, we've always had an annual conference, and we did, and we would get over 200 people attending to that, so it is comparable. Obviously, GBS LEP is a much larger area than our geography, and I think in terms of punching above our weight, I think we do really well, considering we are much smaller with much less levels of investment. So I wouldn't entirely accept those points, but yeah, obviously there is no resistance in terms of scrutiny whatsoever, and for the record, it was us who brought up scrutiny 3 years ago and asked for it to increase.
I would also say in terms of things like the sit rep, it is something we will continue to do probably annually in some cases because the data does move so quickly. So an economic assessment done in 2020 now will be completely worthless to us because of the changes that have happened over the last 2 years. So we will need to continue to refresh that data. It will continue to be a big part of what we do in order to develop and deliver the best for our businesses. So it's not the only thing we do, but it is going to be a huge amount of work, and it's going to be built on what we do. So things like the sit rep economic intelligence will continue to be a big part of our work. But I agree with that, and I think any scrutiny is completely welcome. And we're able to come to this or individual borough councils whenever is necessary.
Can I say that when I worked at University Hospital North Midlands, we had daily sit reps, but that's as it may be. So can I have an assurance then that scrutiny will improve at least to Councillor Francis' level of every 6 months rather than annually? Because annually we can do hardly anything to effectively scrutinise.
So from our perspective, we've never resisted any scrutiny whatsoever. If people are happy to make to approach us, we're absolutely fine with it. We've never resisted ever.
Councillor Francis.
Yeah, just a quickie. I'm on the board of the BIC, and the BIC's been involved with some of this for a long time. I know that it's a heck of a job to get people to come forward. We've got funding in the pot to the tune of £1 million, I think, at the minute, for start-up companies. But to get to those companies and to get to the people to come and access that money is a dickens of a job, and the marketing has got to be spot on. How are you marketing the LEP and the SITREP, as it's going to be, to get the companies to come forward to involve and engage in this? Because, and Colin's point is correct, and my fellow councillor over here, it's a county-wide thing, this is, not just Stoke-on-Trent and the north bit of Staffordshire. It's a big county, and there's a lot of companies in there that need support and help, and I'd like to know how you access them.
First of all, yes, it is a difficult job to get those messages into businesses. I think the way we do it is, obviously, we have a growth hub which has huge reach, which is currently subcontracted to the Chamber, but that will become more in-house next year. And we have a marketing team through there which we reach as many businesses as we can. The growth hub personally speaks to, I think, about 2,000 businesses just face-to-face last year, which is a small amount, obviously, in comparison of what's available. We also do more social media and marketing campaigns to reach as many businesses as we possibly can, not just through our own channels, but through the local authorities, through things like the network of networks, which, again, the number of 25 is slightly misleading because it's about their members and their networks as well. That's the point. So we try and reach as many businesses as we possibly can in order to give them the information of what's available in things like grants and other funding programs. But the key thing is having the expertise to be able to explain it properly, because what we don't want to do is say there's lots of money available and then it's not right for that business. So we need to be careful that we understand what's available, not just from our own pot, but from across the whole patch. That's what the Growth Hub and the LEP staff are really good at, is understanding what's available and getting that message out with an expert voice so businesses understand it, we can talk them through it, we can refer them to anything that's suitable for them. And that's what we do. And it is difficult to get, there's not every business is going to be kind of looking at that thing at that time. So it's a constant messaging campaign through regular media, through social media, through our website, and through our partners as well. And that's something that we've built, and that does work quite well. But again, there's always room for improvement, and we'll continue to build on that.
Just quickly, I assume all the chambers are heavily involved in this anyway.
Yes.
Councillor Pert, Jeremy Pert.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst on the last breath I said I welcomed you being strategic, I scratched my head and wondered, I can understand the aspiration of wanting to be take the role of trusted partner for business, but also being the trusted voice for business into partners. But maybe one of the issues for some of the disparate partners is whether there are shared priorities. I think from a district point of view, and I'm not meaning to be parochial, but that's certainly something I can associate with. And I was reading in the papers under 3.6 about the Levelling Up white paper. You don't need to refer to this one. And there is an absolute role that the LEP could be playing in making sure that levelling up funding is delivered successfully and well. And I wondered then whether actually the full transfer of your knowledge and experience and expertise is done across the projects. Because I looked at your website with a whole stack of reference projects, across Keele, across Staffordshire, across Chatterley Valley, across all sorts of Branston Locks, all sorts of places. Loads of places in Stafford Borough as well. Red Hills, Method, there's Stafford West Access Road, Stafford College, and so on and so forth. And I wondered whether there was enough of that transference of what you've learnt on each individual bit and other partners have learnt, because actually, maybe some of those partners need to also give back a bit more and help with the next level of ambition in terms of delivery. And it's not all about funding, in my view. Your website is very focused on funding. And probably, given that's your old role, not your new role, probably does need to reflect some of the things you bring to the party. And one of those is I would love you to be giving a message that Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent is open for business. I can't find it particularly in there. If I'm not here within your 32,000, I might be interested in coming, why Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, not somewhere else? Now, okay, you could say to me the borough and the county do that fabulously, but I think sometimes we have to reflect the same messages to other places. And I'd love all partners to have the same shared ambitions and the same same priorities, so that we actually reflect those consistently. Because sometimes that is the difference why people come to Staffordshire rather than going somewhere else, because they know there is a consistent view, consistent voice, and that we attract people into to be those, and I think Alan called them the high growth businesses. We want those people to come in as well. And maybe there's a few points in there that you might want to think about.
Like to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely, and really appreciate the feedback. I think in terms of shared priorities, when we had the remit to develop the industrial strategy, it was one of the largest pieces of well-researched work economically across this area, and created a cohesive plan for the whole patch. You engaged every area. Unfortunately, the government have walked away from that and now have the 10-point plan for growth. So we have little influence over that. In terms of levelling up funding, and that's a direct interaction now between local authorities, and the LEPs aren't including those conversations either. So from a LEP perspective, we have significant knowledge and expertise. We'd be happy to engage with any partners.
Councillor Francis made the comment about whether we should be scrutinising again and what sort of frequency. I'm of the opinion that twice a year is probably a bit too frequent, and I don't know whether we'd get any benefit from that sort of frequency twice a year, bearing in mind the other things we need on the agenda. I'm wondering whether the format might change to make it more meaningful for us. I'm wondering whether a sort of case study format might be useful if we were to invite the LEP back again to go through some of the examples of some of the projects that are on the local growth fund or the other funds that are under place, the Getting Building Fund, and actually give more of a potted history about what the purpose was, how the LEP influenced it, what the outcomes were, and the LEP's contribution. I think that might be a different form. That would be perhaps getting under the skin a bit more. And we can timetable that for a future meeting. As I say, I don't think regularly reviewing it every 6 months will give us any more than we've currently got. So we're somewhat superficial at the level I think we're looking at, unless we get into the details, some of the plans that have actually taken place. So what do members think about that as an idea? We timetable something that with the LEP involved? Yeah? Okay, we'll put that into the work programme. We'll try and get that for a future meeting. Councillor Wilcox.
Chairman, I just wondered whether the districts and boroughs could perhaps get together and perhaps have a briefing perhaps from the LEP at an interval, just, you know, to bring in those other authorities that perhaps feel as though they haven't scrutinised it to the extent they wish to. If an update also for our members just from the LEP board may well just give us a feeling of more inclusivity into it, perhaps for the those of us that are on the southern part of Staffordshire.
Did you want to comment on the idea of a briefing?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So absolutely, we'd be very up for that. From our perspective, I make sure that we engage on a monthly basis with all officers in every district and borough. I would draw your attention to our minutes of our board meetings, and you might find that illuminating to understand the attendance rates of the various boroughs and their contribution. You might find that illuminating.
Thanks for that, Councillor Wilcox. If we do have the sort of format that I referred to with a series of case studies, it might be appropriate for those districts and boroughs affected by those case studies to want to participate and be part of that process. Any other comments whilst we've got our visitors from the SSLEP? No? Okay. Can I thank both of you then, Alan Rogers and Andy Devaney, for your attendance? And we'll move on to the last item on our agenda, which is the work programme. You'll see that for the next meeting, we've got the Q3 financial statement and progress report. And hopefully, I'm not sure if he's still on the call, but we might see Councillor Parry back in the UK. We've got the people strategy due also, which is a pre-cabinet meeting in March. And we've got part 2, if you like, of the Boundaries Commission work, which again will be pre the March council meeting. April, we've got the civil contingencies, which is a pre-discussion for scrutiny. Our general governance review we've asked to have put on, that was put on from December. And children's transformation, that will be the opportunity for us to discuss the issues that Councillor Francis wanted discussing, particularly the budget implications of the children's transformation. Are there any comments or additions that we want to make, other than the one we've just talked about, of trying to schedule something in for the LEP, which would involve case studies? Any other comments on the work programme?
That would be very welcome.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKinnon? Any other comments? No? Okay. I'll draw the meeting to a close and thank you for your attendance.